the top quarter of your class. Scholarships awarded provide for tuition and board. This is a chance for you to attend St. Michael's University School and find yourself challenged by a curriculum which strengthens mind and body alike. The $25,000 BCTV Scholarship Fund helps promising students on their way into today's world through an education at St. Michael's University School in Victoria.
BCTV!
Good morning. We have a major labour story this morning in that 6 of the big boys in the mining industry have decided to ask the Combines Investigation Board of Canada to have a very hard look at the non-affiliation clauses in the construction industry in British Columbia. And if they don't want them broken up, they at least want the wings of the BC and Yukon Trades Council severely clipped, so that in future there cannot be arbitrary walkouts, even under a contract, because the building trades won't work with certain unions. And to give us that story this morning is a Vancouver labour lawyer by the name of Don Jordan. And then, well, it's not for light relief. We have a man who has been described as a right-wing dinosaur of the Tory party. Yet another of the thundering herd of potential leaders making his kind of obeisance to the West Coast to show that even though he's from the East, he's a very nice fellow and deserves Joe Clarke's job. Maybe John Gamble will tell us bluntly why he wants to stab Joe Clarke in the back. But then again, we'll see. Now, for one section of the program this morning, I must precede it with a very sad and tragic note. Alvin Narod, the chairman of the board of BC Place, died in Vancouver over the weekend. Narod will not be forgotten for his work in BC Place. He is the man who built on target and on time the stadium, which was so magnificently opened, you might say, the other day by Her Majesty the Queen. But the work at BC Place goes on. And this morning, to give us an idea, I hate the word, but I'm going to use it, of the concepts of what's going to happen around the vast stone stadium are 2 people. One is none other than Vancouver's world-famous architect, Arthur Erickson, who is a consultant on the planning and design of the whole complex, and David Padmore of BC Place, who is the director of planning. Now, let's have a look at that. A little bit of a look at the concept of BC Place right now. I think you've got a little bit of ENG there. Have we? Have we? 4, 3, 2, 1. This is not what it's going to be. This is part of what it may well look like down the road when the money is raised and the whole thing is complete within the next decade, I should imagine. But first, for the top of the program this morning, we're going to start with John Gamble. Number 7, 8, or 9, whatever, for the Tory leadership after the break. When Joe Clarke comes here on Wednesday, Joe Gamble, I want to be able to tell him from you why he should not be elected the leader of the Tory party in Ottawa in June. Now, you give me a message for Joe.
Jack, don't tell him that.
You don't want him to be leader?
No. Listen, that isn't the issue. I'm not telling anyone they shouldn't be the leader. What I am, however, doing is indicating what my position would be on a number of issues, offering myself as a candidate and asking the delegates who they prefer.
In other words, you're working on a little power base for Joe Gamble so that when you get 36 delegates voting for you, you might get a minor cabinet portfolio.
Heavens no, and I rejected that suggestion from the beginning. By the way, you'd need more than 36 delegates voting for you if you hope ever to be successful at all. This whole program is designed, as far as I'm concerned, to deal with the issues. And when some of the candidates for the leadership make statements like my way or the doorway, I'd like to know what their way is. You can certainly find out what my way is by simply asking me.
Okay, what is your way? Who are you?
How long have we got, Jack, to deal
As
with
long
this
as
issue?
it's necessary.
All right,
I think
all
a
right,
couple of minutes
all right.
would do.
No, it won't
Yeah,
do, because
2 or 3 minutes at the most.
there are a variety of very substantial issues with which we have to concern ourselves, even if we dealt with the criminal law, for instance.
Are you a lawyer?
Yes, I
Oh,
practiced
my
law
God.
before I became...
Another lawyer?
There's nothing wrong with that.
How's the
You're a
common sense full of them?
broadcaster, and I suppose if we would indicate that there are certain people that should or shouldn't be involved in politics, we might add you to the list after we dealt with the barristers and solicitors in the country. But let's look at just one issue, and it's not one that I've dealt upon at any great length, but capital punishment as an illustration. I've indicated exactly what my position is. I think that we should reinstitute capital punishment for the very good reason that the majority of Canadians believe that we should have it. I'm not going to, in that 2 minutes you've given me, describe whether it's a deterrent or not, but there's one thing that's absolutely clear. Anyone who is executed is not going to come back and commit the same offense again. And we have circumstances like that which confront us on a regular basis. I think we have to look at the appropriateness of mandatory supervision. And quite frankly, the Parole Act should be amended so that mandatory supervision no longer exists. But fundamentally, I think we have to examine the way in which the sentences are imposed by the courts. And it's no excuse to simply, as a politician, complain about the judicial system and say the judges are too lenient. Parliament has an obligation. They fix maximum sentences. Parliament also should fix minimum sentences. If indeed the sentences imposed by the judicial system in Canada are out of whack with what the public believes they should be, and I believe that to be the case, my constituents believe that to be the case, then I'm suggesting that Parliament intervene and establish some basis below which sentences cannot.
Well, there was a recent case over the weekend, which I know a little bit about. A guy gets a little over 6 years for a very nasty
Patrick,
rape indeed.
Yeah.
He's eligible for parole after 2 years. He gets out after 4 years. It's arrant nonsense.
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, that particular gentleman, after 4 years, must be released according to the recent decision of the BC Supreme Court.
Chief Justice dissented in that, by the way, which is a hopeful sign. But
the fact of the matter remains that he has been identified, this particular man, Truscott, to whom you made reference, has been identified by the Chief Justice as a danger to society. How is it that the laws of Canada are implemented in a fashion which will permit a man identified by the judicial system as being a danger to society to be released on the streets before his sentence is completed?
Because the legislation is sloppy.
I know that,
Well,
and I know that.
But that's not going to make you the leader of the Tory
Well, I know
party.
that, except that you should go to some of the others who are running, ask them their specific solutions for some of these specific problems.
I have done, and I can give you theirs. Joe, of course, is not for capital punishment. Mulroney is not for capital punishment. Crosby is not for capital punishment. You and Pocklington are for capital punishment.
Well, so are 86% of my constituents who responded to a survey which I undertook.
One thing you'll
So
guarantee...
are about 80% of the people in Canada.
Well, let's take a moment in capital punishment. Will you hang every killer?
No, of course not. Because
why not?
Well, let's be very frank. It's only for premeditated murder.
Olson, for instance.
Oh, of course. I don't think we'd have the problem of his gaining the benefit of all the media attention that he's attracted as a result of his 10, 11 acknowledged
But I've got a
homicides.
suggestion for you. Have you ever been to a hanging?
No, but if you want me to go to one, if you want me to, in fact, engage in the actual execution process itself, that's fine. But by the way, I don't know that it necessarily need be hanging. I think there are other ways that it can be, that capital punishment. I think injections are probably the most effective, but that's quite frankly, that's an issue which is to be dealt with.
But you feel so strongly about this. Are you prepared to advocate that if we have capital punishment, it should be done in public on television, and then it's a deterrent?
Well, of course, if that's necessary. But if you're injecting someone with...
you put that in your own words, so we can use this as a news clip.
Yeah.
If you were Prime Minister, if you brought back capital punishment, in what way would it be delivered and how would the public see it?
But I don't know that it's, in view of the fact that I'm suggesting that maybe an injection is the best way that it be done, that it creates any kind of a deterrent factor. The actual administration of some kind of a drug.
Well, I've been to hangings. And it certainly makes you feel...
Did it deter you from the...
Oh, it certainly made me feel terribly uncivilized.
Well, I'll tell you, we have some direct evidence. You may recall some years ago.
How did we go into capital punishment so much?
Well, you asked me to deal with something specific, and I, of course, did
You
that. But
certainly
if you recall some years ago, in Toronto, there was a shoeshine boy by the name of Emmanuel Jacques who was drowned in a sink. And
12-year-old.
Exactly.
Young Street.
That's right, and there were about 4 people involved in the offense. One of them, by the way, at the trial admitted that had there been capital punishment in effect at the time, that he might have been deterred from participating in that event. We had direct evidence of someone who's been convicted of the offense. But there are other issues aside from the criminal law.
But, as an old-fashioned sensational newsman, I've got to ask you this. Do you want public executions of premeditated murderers?
If indeed we use an injection, then of course you could show it on television. I don't know that you have to have 1,000 people there. I don't know that there would be that many people interested in attending.
Well, 86% of the people want it, enough to watch it.
Jack, if you would take your television cameras to the execution chamber, I'm convinced that we could arrange to have them in there.
How about, who are you? You're a lawyer. How old are you?
I'm 49 years of age. I practiced law before I became involved in politics. I was elected in 1979. I defeated the then incumbent Minister of Defense, Barney Danson, in York North. I was re-elected in 1980.
Right. Who are your political heroes?
Johnny MacDonald, John Diefenbaker, Winston Churchill. Yeah.
Diefenbaker. He was a disaster.
Oh, Diefenbaker at his time delivered a message which we have never had from any other prime minister. He inspired Canadians. We need that kind of inspiration. I know we're looking back at 25 years from the death of the Avro Arrow. No one is perfect, Jack. No one is suggesting he's perfect. But at his time, John Diefenbaker brought Canadians together. His saying, I am a Canadian,
that's true.
is most
and the
important.
Conservative
Today,
Party, shortly after, as they've done recently, destroyed him by internecine warfare. Petty jealousies and lack of patronage.
Yes, Dalton Camp, some of the very people that are now suggesting that we ought not to have had a leadership convention were the people who participated in that in the Diefenbaker era.
Dalton Camp, you're part of the cashew coalition he talks about.
Well, remember, Dalton Camp was a liberal to begin with. He masqueraded as a conservative, but I believe that he's been a liberal all his lifetime, and he's certainly acting as a very much as a liberal today.
Bilingualism?
Look, let's talk about what it implies.
Now, are you in favor of the official language
Not the implementation. I filed a...
are you in favor of 28% of all federal civil service being French Canadians?
No. No,
you're not?
No.
You'd cut it down to what?
No, I wouldn't cut it down at all. I don't believe that you should categorize how people get jobs in the public service or how they are promoted
Are you
in the public
favor
service.
of metric?
No.
You'd wipe it out?
I would not oblige anyone to use the metric system of measurement.
Are you in favor of foreign aid?
No. Do you want me to tell you why, rather than just have a categorical opposition? I think there are 2 kinds of foreign aid: humanitarian aid, development aid. With respect to humanitarian aid, if there's an earthquake, a tidal wave around the world, I think that Canada should respond and provide instant relief to those people who are in need of it. If you're talking about development aid, I'm opposed to it for a variety of reasons. First of all, most of that development aid goes to nations who have destroyed the free enterprise system that they now wish to, that they've replaced with socialism. And they're now relying on the vestiges of our free enterprise system to prop up their regime.
Fair enough. More with John Gamble, the Tory version of Barry Goldwater, after the break. You haven't told me yet why you want to dump Joe. I want Joe's faults.
I don't...
Is he a wimp?
No.
Is Joe a wimp?
Let the public decide that. Let the delegates decide that. What he has said just recently is that it has to be my way or the doorway. That certainly isn't a wimp speaking, but what I would like to inquire is to what is his way. I mean, I'm prepared to indicate what my way is, but it's appropriate to say where you stand on a variety of issues. You mentioned his position with respect to capital punishment, and I think that this whole process that we're dealing with will permit very astute broadcasters such as yourself to bring out the positions of the various candidates for the leadership so that the delegates and the people of Canada generally will have an opportunity to judge us.
Okay, you don't know anything about the economy of the country. After all, you're only a lawyer.
Oh, yes.
So you'd scrap Petrocam?
No, what I've said specifically with respect to Petro-Canada is this, and most Crown corporations. Petro-Canada is getting $367 million this year out of the public treasury. I've said that we can no longer afford to pay them a dime. They, if indeed are ours, I want to see them start to declare some dividends and give me some money. But in the meantime, they ought not to come to the public treasury to be supported. The CBC is another perfect illustration, $820 million a year.
Wipe it out.
I've given them 3 years, knocking off their budget by $273 million a year so that at the end of 3 years they have no more funds. Now they can either do one or two things, cut back their costs or increase their revenues. And if you listen to Pierre Junot, what he wants to do is reduce the revenues. He wants to eliminate the association with their affiliates. That will reduce their revenues from advertising and, of course, add once again to the cost of the operation of that outfit.
And of course you're going to have to turn back the clock on the entire national energy policy and put Lougheed in his place.
Well, you don't have to put Lougheed in his place. Let's look at what costs the consumers of Canada money, if you're talking about energy costs. It's the taxes that are imposed between the wellhead and the time that you actually get it at the pump. 2/3 in my province, and I'm not familiar with BC, but I look at the prices at the pump and I suspect they're about the same. 2/3 of the ultimate cost is made up of taxes. 1/2 of that 2/3, federal taxes, and the other half a split between the selling province and the producing province, in this case Alberta you're talking about. So that the real culprit in the whole piece are the governments that are robbing the taxpayers blind with excessive taxation.
How can you cut back?
Ah, well.
You can't cut. Would you cut back UIC?
No,
Would
no,
you
no,
cut
wait,
back
wait,
Canada
wait.
Assistance
No,
Plan?
no, hold on.
Would you cut back aid to education from the federal
well,
government?
let me tell you what I would cut. When I cut out that foreign aid in the fashion that I've described by establishing criteria which had to be applied in order to entitle nations to receive development aid in Canada, I would save $1,800 million.
On that alone?
On that alone. Now, remember, we borrow the money to give it away. We borrow the $1.8 billion to give away. It costs us $200 million to borrow the $1.8 billion a year. There's $2 billion alone. I spoke about the CBC programming off their $820 million. There's $273 million. 367 with respect to Petro-Canada. $1,151 million spent on the Petroleum Incentive Program, which is the federal dry hole drilling in northern
But aren't
Canada.
you ashamed to be associated with a party which blew its chances for a government because they couldn't count heads? Not Baker, not Crosby, not Clarke, not you. You were there too. No, you came in after that.
No, I was there.
You were there.
I was there in 1979.
You must have been fair ashamed that night when you...
I wasn't ashamed. I was stunned because you can appreciate I was elected in 1979. I went up there and I was going to rely upon the accumulated wisdom of all of those that had so astutely managed an electoral minority victory in 1979. I was astounded when it happened. I was as shocked that very night as most of the people in the country were.
That was when you were determined that Joe must go.
No, I've never been determined that Joe must go. What I have been determined about, both in 1981 and in 1983, when we recently held our general meeting, was that our party should have a leadership convention. And the purpose of that convention was to offer to the delegates, to the party generally, and to the people of Canada, an opportunity to look at the various contenders to see which one would do the best job.
Yes or no on cruise missiles?
I'm in favor of the testing of the guidance system of the cruise missile, which is in fact what the Americans want to test over northern Canada. That guidance system is manufactured in Canada by Canadians.
No holds barred. We're a proper part of the alliance, and we must test the cruise missile.
Well, even if it has nothing to do with NATO, we're dependent upon the United States, let's face it, to defend Canada. And that cruise missile is currently in use in the United States and can be used for the defense of North America.
How much are you spending on your campaign?
As little as possible.
How much, sir?
I don't know. I'll spend...
100,000?
Well...
200,000?
If I manage to raise 50,000, I'll spend 50,000. If I raise 100, I'll spend 100. Whatever I manage to raise. I can't tell you now.
None of your own money, though.
Oh, yes, I've spent some of my own money already.
We'll take an early break in time for one segment of phone calls with... Mind you, if you're a minor candidate, you can afford to be blunt, can't you? After the break. Yes, John?
Yes.
You're on again now.
Well, that's fine.
You didn't know
No,
we were on when I said, after all, he's a minor candidate and he can afford to be blunt?
Jack, you know, I could say, after all, as a minor broadcaster, you can afford to be abrasive, but I think it's because you're a major broadcaster and are abrasive that you're still a major broadcaster. And maybe being blunt and being straight and fair with the public is what politics should be about.
Just want answers to questions. And how many times do we not get answers? 9 times out of 10. At least you're in favor of public executions and all kinds of things straight up, aren't you? Too smart to answer that question. He's been in court before. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster. Mr. Gamble, Jack was just saying you're answering questions and everything else. How many federal politicians, or I should say ex-federal politicians, are getting their pensions, and how much of that money, or how much is that money that is my tax dollars? Can you give me some idea how many millions or billions of dollars?
Yeah, I can.
I'll hang up so I can turn on the TV.
Please hang up.
I can't give you any specific figures. Doubtless, you are contributing to federal pensions, politicians' pensions. You will contribute to them, so will your children and your grandchildren.
Well, you take a senator like Jack Austin, that Eastern woman who wrote the book, Christina McCall Newman, works out that Austin will get about $4.5 million total benefits. Would you wipe out index pensions for MPs?
I voted in favor of the bill which reduced our pension.
Why should MPs get index pensions after a few miserable years in the House of Commons sitting on a back bench? It's not fair, is it?
It isn't fair that MPs or public servants or anyone who
is John Gamble willing to say that he'd wipe out index pensions until it can be given to all Canadians?
I am not willing to say that.
Why not?
I'm not willing to say that because, quite frankly, the part of the pension that we're saying is indexed is contributed by the Member of Parliament at a rate which other Canadians don't make their contributions.
As I recall, Donald MacDonald, when he's 65, picks up about $300,000 a year.
I don't know that those... I think, Jack, what you have to look at is the average that members of Parliament, in fact, receive. There's about $500 a month. John Diefenbaker, for instance, didn't draw a dime of his pension, and that fund, which was specifically contributed, went to the benefit of other members of Parliament, who came along later.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
My question to Mr. Gamble is one I'd like to see asked of all the potential prime ministers of Conservative Party is when in British Columbia, are you a supporter of our so-called Liberal coalition, or are you a true Conservative?
I would prefer, this may get me in some real hot water. All right. I would prefer that the Conservative Party of British Columbia were the party that was supported by the National Conservative Party. I don't believe that there will ever be a day when you have a provincial Conservative Party in this province unless the National Conservative Party supports it.
That's right. In other words, the National Conservative Party is wrong to be hypocritical and secretly support social credit.
I think we should be supporting our own, and that means the Provincial Progressive Conservative
All
Association.
aid short of actual money.
It may well be that there may be times when it's appropriate to even support them with funds.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Gamble. I appreciate what you said about the capital punishment. I agree with it completely. They should bring it back. I think it would be a good deterrent to a lot of the criminals out there. I think it's really a waste of money to have them sitting in cells like that, and they should be executed if the court decides they should be.
Okay.
There are some people, of course, who particularly qualify for that kind of treatment. We know some of them here in this province.
Here.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Yeah, I couldn't defend the Olson case. Right, anything else? No? Thank you. Bye. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Gamble?
Yes.
What do you really think your chances of winning the leadership are? And don't you think that you're
today?
just really splitting the vote?
Splitting the vote. No, I would say that today my chances are very remote, but tomorrow they will be better, and the day after tomorrow they will have improved again. And by the time we reach the convention floor and I've had an opportunity to speak to delegates personally and in a speech, I think that I may have started the process of moving up through the center of the two main contenders.
Is it not a fact that Joe Clarke became the leader by happenstance and petty jealousies as the votes were switched on the later ballots?
I cannot either confirm or deny that.
You remember.
No,
You were there.
but you would never know what motivated individuals, and it's a mistake, I think, Jack, to say that this delegate voted this way because of that thing.
Because he hated him less than he voted the other one.
That, of course, may be the circumstance.
Especially true of the Conservative Party.
Well, of course, that's the way
No
that...
discipline in the
wait a
party.
minute, wait a minute. That's the way national elections are won. We won the national election in 1979 because people voted against the Liberals. Some people thought, mistakenly, that we won it because they loved us. That wasn't the case at all, because you could see so shortly after that they had an opportunity to vote against us.
And that's why you'll win the next election, because people still hate the Liberals.
That is exactly the case, and there's where the problem comes, Jack. What do we do after we've won the election? I think that we have to have our policies in place, principles by which we're to guide ourselves, and I think that the party has to be, and when I say the party, I mean the general membership of the party, rather than the leadership of the party, has to be involved in determining what those general guidelines are. That's what this is all about.
Go ahead to John Gamble.
Hello?
No? Yes, go ahead. Is that your wife in the background?
Hello.
Hello, that's you. Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. I would like to ask the question about the...
No, I'm sorry, sir. He's got his television set up, and that gives instant mental confusion. That's his problem. It does.
Well,
Go ahead from Prince George.
Hello,
Yes.
Prince George.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't hear you guys very well down there.
Well, we can hear you.
Yeah. Well, Jack, I've been watching you, following you for what seems like 20 years. I've never phoned you. Never been motivated to the point I am now. I'm a logger. It's breakup. My truck's broken. I got no money to fix it. I'm going to go on welfare.
Go on.
Well, I believe the government has taxed me right out of business.
Well, he's right, of course.
Yeah, well, everybody's got rights but me.
No, very few of us have any rights.
Just a minute. How old are you?
25.
Are you in business for yourself?
What's that?
Well,
yeah,
you-
right.
And have they seized your truck?
Well, no, but they're gonna. If I can't find a job, which I don't think I can. And if I do find a job, the truck needs so much work because I haven't had the money to fix it. I
know.
tell you, us forestry workers, we make the bucks in this province.
Yeah.
And if we go down,
The economy
Province
goes
is
down.
going down.
I know. There's a voice of real desperation representing 1 million odd Canadians who are at their wits' end
Yep.
and who, despite world trade, tend to put it on the backs of every politician in the country, federal, provincial, and municipal, for feathering their own taxable nests. I mean, for spending the money in the wrong places.
Jack, do you know how many guys die in the forest industry every year?
Yep, the most dangerous industry in the country.
Who's looking out for us? Where are these big investigations that people are doing? You know, setting up committees by lobbyists, you know, talking about rights. They don't know what rights are. They're
Well-
a bunch of whining, complaining people.
Yeah, I can get your point, sir, and thanks very much for your call. That's a most sober call on which to finish. John, I hope you'll forgive me if I pulled your leg a little bit
Not
this
a
morning.
bit, not a bit.
But after all, we don't know you.
I
And
can't-
we may never, ever see you again.
Jack, I hope that never is the case.
My thanks. Best
Thank
of
you.
luck. I'm glad you're taking part in it. Give it your best shot.
The only way.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
I'm going to be down at the CTV National Convention in June.
Yes.
Would you be the one candidate who gets up and tells the world why you don't like the other candidates?
No.
Damn you. BC Place, Arthur Erickson and Dave Padmore after the break. Well, it's a kind of sad way to start the program this morning. I mentioned that Alvin Narod, the chairman of the board of BC Place, had died over the weekend. Mr. Narod was a man of particular sincerity, clarity, sanity, and logic. And in all the years I've been reporting in British Columbia, and I've met everybody in the province almost without exception, let me say that dealing with Alvin Narod was something very different. He was a man you could go to, you could ask a question, and you could get an answer without equivocation. And his loss will be sorely felt, I'm sure, not only by people like myself, but by those in BC Place. So this morning is a good time to look at what's going to happen hereafter in BC Place. And for that purpose this morning, I have here none other than, and I've been waiting to interview him for years, the Arthur Erickson, who is a consultant architect for the broad vision of BC Place to come. Is that correct, Arthur?
That's right.
I will not ask you about the Washington Embassy. I will not ask you why I can't go from the bottom floor to the top floor in the courthouse. I like your Macmillan Bladell building, and I like many of your other buildings. David Padmore, you're the Director of Planning.
Yes.
Now, what we're going to see this morning, is it going to be firm planning, or is it concept we're talking about?
These are concepts, Jack, that we want to put forward now for discussion with Vancouver Council.
Okay, now before we come to the concept, my incredible staff has put together a montage of some of the Erickson triumphs, which we shall now see, and we may or may not be able to talk about some of them. So here we go. From the cover of one of his books, Simon Fraser?
That's right.
Let's see what I can do. Don't know.
Lethbridge University.
Don't know.
Museum of Man here.
UBC. Private residence.
Yeah, Vancouver. Expo 70, Japan. Private residence in Vancouver. The Bank of Canada in Ottawa. Museum of Man, still Vancouver.
They're holding that one.
Private residence, Vancouver. Lethbridge again. Private residence, Vancouver. Name one.
Nicely done, though, isn't it?
This is a mosque in Saudi Arabia. Another private residence, Vancouver.
It's not my place. Another private residence.
Yes, in the interior.
In the interior of BC.
This is Macmillan
Macmillan Bladell building.
Yeah.
Forest of fir trees.
That's right.
Private residence.
You're very good.
Yeah. Courthouse, Robson
Courthouse,
Square.
Robson Square.
And an overall look at the north shore of Falls Creek with a concept of what's going to be there. Is that correct?
That's right.
Now, when did you become involved in this, Arthur?
This is about 6 months ago, a year ago.
7
Yeah,
months ago.
7 months
And what
ago.
do you see as your mission here?
Well, I think my office and the office of Fisher Freedman in San Francisco were brought together to try and establish general concepts with David as to how BC Place could develop. We were not involved in determining what kind of architecture should be there, but really getting an idea of for instance, what should be done with the foreshore, how it should tie into the city and relate to the existing city. The argument for density, which is a very touchy one with the city. And my position has always been that density in the downtown, if it's residential density that we're talking about, is the most important thing we can do, that we want people living in the downtown.
To supply human beings on the streets.
Absolutely, and
so-
make it possible to walk to work and that sort of thing.
Well, with your worldwide traveling, and God knows you're never here.
Yeah.
But lucky you're here this morning. Normally you're on a plane going somewhere or coming back from somewhere. When you look at Falls Creek, comparing it to other potential sites throughout the world, does it measure up really as a first-class architectural site for the proper development of that area?
Well, I think Vancouver, the downtown of Vancouver, is unique in the world. I've often said, many people have said, it's a kind of mini Manhattan insofar as it's almost an island, but it's only about 1 mile across and 2 miles long. Therefore, it has a scale that means that everyone living there and working there can be within walking distance, which you can't be in Manhattan. And I think that our observation in developing this plan was to look at how the city has developed in the past. And no matter what people say about the West End, there's a very attractive living situation there. That the point towers that were developed are almost unique to Vancouver. These slim towers that let people see through and past and that sort of thing. And that what we wanted to do was to really surround the downtown core with a sufficient density of housing that you could continue that kind of pattern, of being able to live in the city.
Not to try to cause political trouble of any kind, and I'm no architect, but I'm going to make a little statement. I want you to cut me to shreds on it. I think the most ghastly mistake that was made in the development of downtown Vancouver was in putting a Montreal-style underground shopping center in the heart of the city. How wrong am I?
I quite agree with you.
I'm right.
No, I think that I've always felt that there was absolutely no reason to go underground in Vancouver. There was a very good reason in Toronto and in Montreal.
Climate.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a very good reason in Houston, Texas. Climate. Vancouver, I think, would have been much better to keep people on the streets.
If we'd kept the people on the streets, we wouldn't have had the
Absolutely.
problems we have in the Granville Mall and in parts of the West End.
Yeah.
Hey, hooray.
Yeah.
Now, David, we're going to look, not yet, we're going to look at the beginning of the next break at some of these concepts. How far has your planning gone beyond the magnificent, on-target, on-time stadium?
We're at the point now, Jack, that we've completed a development plan, and we're just now getting ready to present it to the public and to the council for discussion, and we hope that they will adopt it as a basic zoning for the development site. We are installing roadways and utilities now, and we're ready to start letting some contracts for construction of the waterfront. So we have a unique situation here where we have to prepare the site for Expo 86. We'll be installing services earlier than a normal developer would, say over the 20-year life of this project. And we should be leasing properties starting this fall or early next spring for residential and commercial development.
You'll be leasing them out to people who will build the residential and commercial development.
That's right.
Have you straightened out your density problems with the city of Vancouver by any chance?
Not entirely, and that's something that will obviously be part of the discussions with the public and council as they come up in this spring and early summer.
Right, now I'm going to take a break now, and we're going to come up on some of the prepared concepts of what it could look like. How many years down the road?
About 25 years from now.
Oh,
Full
some of it.
development.
I mean, I'll not be here 25 years down the road.
Some of it shows development that we hope would occur over the next 3 to 4 years, some longer.
More with Arthur Erickson and David Padmore, and that architectural genius has just been buttressed in his opinion of the underground shopping in downtown Vancouver by Mr. Erickson after the break. With Arthur Erickson and Dave Padmore. Now we're going to see, I hate this word concepts, drawings. What do you call them?
Concept drawings, really. They
Concept
give
drawings.
you an idea what it
Do
looks
these
like.
drawings represent any particular architectural types, or are they merely...
No, not at all, because most of these are going to be built in 10 to 25 years, so we don't even know what they're going to look like. What the drawings attempt to do is to show the street pattern, the general character that's going to be established. The fact that at the ends of streets you're still going to be able to see the view of the creek, and from across the way you're going to be able to see the mountains.
Okay, let's see it. And you and David can give me little chats on it. They were looking to the North Shore Mountains.
Yeah, this is really coming forward on the whole project, looking at the city in the background and between the bridges.
This is False Creek.
This shows what it might look like at some point on the extension of Beach Avenue, looking towards the creek, and there's a small children's play area or park on the right-hand side.
Oh, that's the Roundhouse Mews on Hamilton Street.
Yes, the idea there is to really preserve the roundhouse and turn it into a retail center. Actually, here you see the division between the existing Yale Town and the new part, which will be of the same scale. There's no attempt to put in taller
Here we're
buildings.
entering the site on Pacific Street, and on the right-hand side of Pacific, as you enter, there'll be a very nice view of False Creek and about a 12 to 14-acre park. This is looking across the creek, across the realigned False Creek marinas, and looking at the development that would occur to the left of the Cambie Street Bridge if you're coming into the city.
And this is one of the fishing piers that will come out from what we call the western neighborhood area in a new bay that's been created in that area.
And then we have the good old stadium.
Yes, and and a hotel on the right. This is and BC Place Park, which would be a very large park gathering place for the city. And this is another of the parks. Altogether, there are 83 acres of parks and 93 acres of developable land.
But 90% of the site is open space or public use. This is the gathering area. Sorry, Arthur.
No. And it shows actually some of the controlled water areas which are really designed for the use of children and recreation and small boats and things of that sort.
This is what it might look like under the area between the Burrard and Granville Bridge opposite Granville Island, and this will be the earliest area to develop at
What's
BC Place.
that?
Well, that's the floating restaurant in the border of Chinatown next to the Sun Yat-sen Gardens. It'll be a Chinese floating restaurant in a new park with a pool created there.
First I've heard of that.
This is just entering the site from the west under the Burrard Bridge.
That?
This is the area just by the Sun Tower at Pender Street and Beatty, and it's looking back along the existing buildings, which are on the right.
Oh, where all the cars are parked at the moment.
That's right.
And that's the old jail town up on the right there.
That's right. That's the Beatty Street properties.
And that?
It's looking down Howe Street across to Granville Island. One of the things we attempt to do is we're going to try and keep the buildings back from the street, protect the view corridors through from the existing city to the water.
Another children's park on the site?
This is one of the large parks. This is a 12-acre park. There's a general recreation park for a almost entirely residential section of the city. This is the end of Pacific, isn't it? As you drive
Yes, that's
into the property and look directly out into
Actually,
Falls
Beach
Creek.
Avenue.
Beach Avenue, I mean, yes. And the entrance at Roundhouse Square. The intention also is to introduce some ferry docks. You have a small ferry that takes you across Falls Creek and perhaps over to Kitsilano and that sort of thing.
The area around the roundhouse we'd like to have as a pedestrian area, a pedestrian street. Without
Some of these tall
vehicles.
buildings will be housing and some will be office space, is that correct?
That's right.
Yes.
Around the stadium, and this is a view of the stadium at night, where the intention is to build restaurants and everything else adjacent to the stadium, because there'll be crowds coming out after a game, and we want to make sure they can be absorbed in this immediate area.
We haven't even talked about parking in detail or anything like that, have we?
No.
Is this the morning to talk about parking?
Sure, if you like.
Is this the morning to talk about the current plans for parking for the stadium when it opens in 1980, this year,
June 19th.
June the 19th? Are you going to have any parking ready for this time?
We're going to have parking on site for about 2,000 vehicles, but as you know, the intention with the stadium was not to have a large supply of parking on site immediately around the stadium, but to rely on the downtown. And I think a good example of how it worked was when the Queen's visit. We had about 40,000 people in the building, and the exiting and the entrancing worked very, very well. There was very little congestion. There was, sure, a 15 to 20 minute period where the sidewalks and the walks were fully occupied, but that was what we intended, to use the existing parking in the downtown and to make people walk that 3 to 4 block
Well, it's not
distance.
often I'm enthusiastic about anything, but I've always said that there are big events in there, that people will get to them and they'll walk 5 miles if they have to. And that was proven in spades the day the Queen was in the stadium.
The
Because
important thing, Jack, is they don't have to walk 5 miles, though. There is adequate parking for all of the major events within about 3,000 or 4,000 feet of the stadium.
all right, as you come now to leasing property, what kind of, for what kind of buildings are you planning perhaps to lease property even this year?
Residential and some commercial opportunities. In the area between the Burrard and Granville Bridge, we would have properties both for residential and some restaurant, lower level retail
Won't the
uses.
recession hold you back quite severely though in your planned development?
It'll slow down the pace of development. It has with everyone that's building in the downtown or in Vancouver. But we had a long lead time to get ready with services and for construction on the waterfront, so we think we'll do quite well out of it.
All right, you game for some telephone calls, Arthur? Okay, your chance to talk to two of the most distinguished architects in the country, Arthur Erickson and Jack Webster. I'm joking, of course, about me. And David Padmore, the man who does the hard work. You do the thinking, he does the work.
Oh, I'd say the other way around.
Calls to on BC Place after the break. Well, Mr. Erickson and Mr. Padmore, where are we going? Don't know what they're going to ask you. Haven't a clue. Go ahead, please.
Morning.
Good morning. That's you. Where are you?
In Vancouver. Good morning.
Yeah, do say something.
I'm a cab driver. I'm wondering what's going to happen here
What way?
with the traffic flow and all that. I noticed that lately they've done a few things around the downtown area that has really messed things up.
Well, is the problem still the Cambie Street Bridge?
Mostly with the reopening of Robson Street. That really made a mess of things.
Well, okay, David.
I agree with you.
Do you agree with?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that was one of the great mistakes the city made, and it was purely a political issue.
Because you decided that that would be closed.
Absolutely, and they haven't rebuilt the Cambie Street Bridge so they get the proper traffic flow, you know, the connection to Smythe and Nelson, which
And all
is
we've
gonna
got
make a
now
big
is that
difference.
narrow little bottleneck where you have the nice plaza from the old courthouse to
Yeah,
the
which
Robson
is
Street site.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. I
Did
think
anybody
it's
ask your
shocking.
opinion before they opened
No,
it?
no.
And you're prepared to tell
Never
them?
even heard. Came down one day and it was open. You know?
Bad opinion, a bad move.
Absolutely.
Erickson said City Council was wrong. God bless
Absolutely.
Erickson. Good. Next call, please. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
Yes, say, Jack, I had a pleasure of meeting you at BC Place last fall, and I'm an iron worker at Local 97.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, seeing that you got those two guys there, I'd like to find out if there's going to be any structural iron buildings going to be going up.
Here's a guy looking for a job. David Padmore.
Definitely. There'll be a lot of construction that would involve your skills. We're looking at about 2,000 man-years of employment each year through the life of BC Place. So we're expecting about 40 to 50,000 jobs created, or man-years of work created by BC Place over the 25-year
You haven't been
lifetime.
told there's going to be a provincial election or anything,
No.
have you?
One of the things we've done, Jack, in preparing the plan is we've done an economic study that we'll present to Council.
Yeah.
And it looks at job creation and what
And you
contribution
say,
BC Place makes
are
to
you
employment.
telling me, David Padmore, without a smile on your face that you're going to have 2,000 man-years this year?
We already have in the order of 1,000 people working on the site. We had 600 to 800 people working at the stadium in the last 2.5 years.
And all
We've got-
being well, if you get City Council agreement and everything, you'll have more jobs this year.
Yes, that's right. We'd like to be under construction with the bridge, continue with the roadways, and get underway with the waterfront treatment.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was just, hearing about all this stuff here. It sounds great. You know, we've got the convention center and everything going up, and we've got the stadium going up and everything. And it sounds great, but I was just wondering, what's going to make this time any different from any other time? Like, what's to say that a couple of years down the road, because, you know, this is long term, a couple of years down the road, they're just going to say, well, that was nice, let's make another study, and another, and another. I was just wondering what's going to make this time any different from any other.
What he's asking you is are we going to have this 20, 25 years development more or less assuredly, or can it be dumped at any time?
I think to a greater extent than you would in other projects. One thing that's unique about the project is Expo 86. We have to get the site serviced. We have to put the utilities and roadways and waterfront treatment in. Expo also means a lot of legacies on the site, things that can be used by the public after Expo 86 that'll be part of BC Place. And Vancouver's housing requirement, even with the recession, is still projected to require
So
something in the order
Expo
of...
86 is the spur.
Expo 86 is the thing that makes sure that the site gets developed and ready for future residential commercial development.
Must ask a question, may not be fair. The design for the convention center, the ship,
Oh, yes.
do you like it?
Well, that's not fair.
Leave it there. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Erickson.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I have a young friend coming from Germany. He's a highly trained young architect. Who does he see about a job?
I'm telling you. How are
Well,
jobs in that?
if I get a job in BC Place, tell them to come and see me. If I don't, tell them to stay away.
But is it tough for young architects?
Oh, very tough. Right now, it's very tough for architects.
That's tough. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
I sometimes feel that I got in on the second act on the whole stadium BC Place thing. It somehow seems somewhere that a lot of the stuff got done backwards. For instance, I don't recall anybody saying that there were any problems with the Cambie Bridge until the stadium got put in place.
Oh, that's not right. The city engineering department for years has been talking about a realignment of the Cambie Bridge on the same basic alignment that's now being recommended. They also had done earlier studies about whether or not the bridge was structurally sound and needed replacement. So BC Place is not the catalyst to the change in the Cambie Street Bridge, but BC Place has offered to pay about what amounts to 50 to 55% of the cost of a realignment because BC Place does benefit from a new bridge. We'd like to see the bridge under construction now. We could have started 6 months ago.
And you'll have to start quite soon, won't you?
We'd like to start tomorrow if we could.
Who's holding you up?
Vancouver City Council.
Vancouver City Council. Any other...
Well, it almost seems that somewhere along the line, Vancouver City Council, speaking for the citizens of Vancouver, didn't particularly want BC Place where it is. And for instance, like parking, it's almost sort of after the fact. There seem to be many problems associated, which...
Again, sir, I have to disagree with you. I don't think at any time council has suggested they don't agree with the project. There is, as there was with any major project, there's some disagreement about the densities, about the amount of non-market housing. With respect to the bridge, council approved in February 1982 the alignment of the bridge and authorized their departments in BC Place to go ahead with the design of the north approaches. They've also authorized funds to look at the design of the full structure. I should point out that most of it's designed now, and the north end is out for tender.
And money bylaw has been passed.
That's right.
But what you have to consider, too, is that all of this was industrial land and rail yards before. And so what it's being replaced with is very necessary housing and also the retail and recreational facilities and everything else that will go along with that. I mean, this is the thing that's going to consolidate the downtown and really make Vancouver, because I've certainly traveled in most cities in North America, one of the most distinctive cities in the city, most livable.
Go ahead from Terrace, BC.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to know if any monies from Lotto 649 are help financing these projects. And if so, when we would be able to get a ticket up here.
Not at BC Place, sir. 649 is providing the funding for Expo, which is a separate project, separate Crown Corporation.
Nothing.
BC Place basically is the landlord of Expo 86. We lease the site to them.
Go ahead from Abbotsford.
Hello. I'm very excited about the BC Place. I think it's long overdue. I just wonder if there's any way that I, as the general public, can become involved in it with either promotions or money raising and the like. Thank you.
There'll be more and more opportunities, ma'am, for you to be involved. Right now, the model is on display at Eaton Centre, and it will be going to the Woodward shopping centres over the next few weeks, and then we'll be in Robson Square in mid-April. And from that point on, we'll start to publish material about the development plans, keep you informed of our discussions with the Vancouver Council, and we hope that people that are interested, like yourself, will see the model, express your views if you're in support or if you have concerns about the project.
I'm trying to think of a final question that could get Arthur in trouble. I can't
Please
really,
don't.
I can't really think about it. What is your major project at the moment? Which?
That's very hard to say. You know, we won a competition for a huge project in Los Angeles, which we're working on at the present time. But that's another, you know, one of these 10-year, 15-year projects, which one works at dips and dabs.
Well, I should go around town today saying, Erickson and Webster agree on a number of things. My thanks to Arthur Erickson, a world-famous architect. Every time you pick up an in-flight magazine, there's another story about Erickson going somewhere and doing something. And David Padmore. I'm sure we all, expressed to Mrs. Narod
exactly.
Sympathy.
It was a great loss.
Great loss.
It really was.
I'll be back with my Labour story after the break. Is Don Jordan, who is a lawyer acting for Noranda Mines, Polaris Mine Services, Mining Association of BC, Plaza Development, and Kirchhoff Construction Limited. And it really is a very dramatic development. You're all aware, those of you involved with trade unions, about the non-affiliation clauses which are in the contracts of the BC and Yukon Building Trades Council, whereby in certain circumstances, in certain places, they don't have to work with certain unions. And this often leads to considerable industrial trouble. I can think about Whistler Town site, I can think about Duke Point, and I can think about trouble, real and potential up at Tumbler Ridge. So I'm going to hand it right to you, Don Jordan, and tell me, What are you and your clients asking for in relation to a Combines investigation in Canada?
Well, first of all, I think that I want to make it clear that my client is the Mining Association of British Columbia. The names that you read out are people who'd signed the complaint, but my client is the Mining Association of British Columbia. And it's complaining basically about the abuses of the non-affiliation clauses and not the non-affiliation clauses itself. We're not trying to roll back the clock 20 years and do away with non-affiliation clauses. We're just saying that we think it's time that someone external from the labor relations scene had a look at them to decide whether they're in the good of the public interest or not.
And why are
we don't think they are.
You think they're against the public interest?
Yes, we should.
Are they a handicap to future peaceful industrial expansion in British Columbia?
Certainly, they're the troubles that are associated with them, the fact that work stoppages are used to enforce them, I think discourages investment and means that if you have that, you're going to have a loss of permanent non-construction jobs down the line.
And what are you asking the Combines investigation people to do, really? To rule that non-affiliation clauses are a restraint of trade against public interest?
We're asking them to rule that in certain circumstances where they go beyond the limits that they originally were intended to have, they are not necessary for the reasonable protection of a trade union and therefore aren't exempt from Combines activity.
Right now. But surely under the Labour Code of British Columbia, non-affiliation clauses are recognized as a proper and valid part of an agreement.
Yes.
And surely your clients in the past, have your clients in the past agreed to these non-affiliation clauses?
Well, certainly not my clients. There's no non-affiliation clauses in mining industry collective agreements. They're confined solely to construction industry collective agreements.
So construction industry management and the Building Trades Council have agreed on non-affiliation clauses?
That's right.
Give me some examples of the damage they can do when they're not properly used.
Well, there's some examples which will strike home. I heard this gentleman from Prince George. One of the things that happens with non-affiliation clauses is that the work is confined to those members or those persons who are members of a trade union that's affiliated with the British Columbia and Yukon Building Trades Council, which means that when they build the Tumbler Ridge Project, the tradesmen come from Vancouver. The local people don't get any sort of access to the job at all. We think that non-affiliation clauses, and this is a big part of our complaint, lead to the unions and management agreeing to some pretty costly items in their collective agreements because they know that everybody else who's a member of this little club is going to have the same kind of costs and they can just pass them on. So we say that when competition is restricted like that, the cost goes up, and the Mining Association of British Columbia, as a consumer of those services, objects to the cost that they're paying to have a mine built.
So one of the reasons you want this redefined over the head of the Labour Board of British Columbia?
Yes.
Is so that your client, the Mining Association, when it buys construction business, gets it at a cheaper price?
Gets it at a price that's determined by fair competition.
Now, as I recall, Whistler Townsite, a decision was made at Whistler Townsite whereby all the work in Whistler Townsite was restricted entirely to the BC and Yukon Building Trades Council.
Quite right.
Is that bad?
Yes. I mean, first of all, none of the local contractors got to bid or work on the job, and they were represented at the hearing at the Labour Relations Board, who just completely seemed to ignore their interests. And as a matter of fact, they raised an argument based upon the Combines implications, which the board just put aside with a very short comment. We think, my clients think it's wrong when you have, say, the Mountain Inn in Whistler being, that wasn't a plug.
Mountain Inn in Whistler.
In Whistler being built by building trades unions, and that means that everything else within a pretty large geographical area has to be built by those people.
But you're afraid of more than that. Are you specifically afraid of Tumbler Ridge?
Well, the Tumbler Ridge case has been before the Labour Relations Board, and they held that it wasn't an integrated job site, and it wasn't the kind of situation where the trade unions could use their non-affiliation clauses. So, no, I think the fear about that one's somewhat less now.
Does the non-affiliation clauses signed by the employers and the BC and Yukon Building Trades Council also act against other legitimate trade unions?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, I think you ought to understand what non-affiliation means. Yeah. It means there are 17 building trades unions who are affiliated with an organization called the British Columbia and Yukon Building Trades Council.
Right.
And the non-affiliation clause is a clause whereby trade unions reserve the right to refuse to work with other people, whether they're members of other trade unions or not, who are not members of a union that's affiliated to the British Columbia and Yukon Building Trades Council. So, for example, the Duke Point case was a case which involved a construction of a sawmill being done by IWA construction forces. And the IWA is not affiliated to the BC&YT, so the trades walked off the job.
But the IWA stuck to the point, and the trades eventually came back and finished the work 6 weeks later.
Well, that's what I understand.
After some considerable expense to those contractors tied up by the dispute.
Well, you know, and that's where I say it's going to discourage investment. You look at the Tumbler Ridge case, the trades walked off alleging that their non-affiliation rights had been granted, and it was 2.5 months before a decision was made by the Labor Relations Board with regard to the validity of the clause. And so for 2.5 months, the enormous amounts of money that are laid out for a project like that, interest costs were accruing, and there was no work being done and no benefits.
That was when the BC and Yukon had sought an integrated work site at Tumbler Ridge.
That's right.
And it was 2.5 months later before the LRB refused on that integrated site.
That's right.
But I understand that BC and Yukon Trades Council are appealing that and would like every single job from Tumbler Ridge to Prince Rupert included in one integrated work site under their control.
Well, and it's exactly that kind of an example which we say is an abuse, and it's exactly the potential for that kind of a thing which we say requires someone else, a non-labor relations expert, to have a look at the problem and decide whether it's in the public interest.
I have something about, what about jurisdictional disputes? This, of course, is really a jurisdictional problem, is it not?
Well, the 17 members of the British Columbia and Yukon Building Trades have pretty strict lines of demarcation between what's an iron worker's work and what's a boilermaker's work. And when they start to fighting about it, the people who suffer are the employers, because they walk off the job and say, we don't want these people doing our work, and then we have downtime while the employer who runs off to the Labor Relations Board suffers a loss.
I understand there was an incident at Ridley Grain Terminal whereby the Painters Union didn't want to handle some pre-treated poles because they had been pre-treated by the steel workers.
That's right. That's right. The Painters Union was objecting to the contractor in that case using pilings which had been coated with a latex coating in a shop and were delivered to the site, and the painter said, no, putting the coating on the pilings is our work, and the steel workers did it, and we object to that.
Did they win or lose it, do you know?
Well, they had an arbitration in which they won, but now the matter's before the Labor Relations Board, so the Labor Relations Board is going to be able to have a look at another facet of the problem, and that's what right does a construction trade union have to dictate how work is done off the construction site.
Isn't that declaring materials in effect hot, even if they've been handled by another union?
It's not how I understand a hot declaration. A hot declaration is usually something that the trades use with regard to struck goods or an employer who's on strike.
But we're getting to this situation so common in Britain, whereby here is a pole treated in a steelworkers plant, delivered to a building trades, the Painters Union, and they'd say, we won't touch that because the covering was put on by... The
Mining Association finds that a frightening possibility.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, well, certainly the association thinks so.
Now, I just want to sum up. You, in the Mining Association, are seeking from the Combine's investigation what kind of inquiry? A public inquiry?
We've launched a complaint to the Combine's investigation branch, and they have the right to determine what kind of an inquiry they're going to hold, but we've requested that they hold a public inquiry pursuant to one of the sections of their statute so that this issue can be fully aired and everybody will have a chance of making their position known, including people who've been affected in the past or have some kind of complaint about this kind of thing.
And you're not, did you tell me, attempting to wipe out non-affiliation clauses?
No. No, not completely. Non-affiliation clauses are a construction industry equivalent to a union security clause, say, in a truck manufacturing plant. And we say as long as it's kept within the confines of that kind of use, it's not objectionable. It serves a legitimate protection type of purpose.
But on the other hand, you also say that because of the restrictiveness of it, all those contractors dealing with the BC and Yukon Building Trades Council pass additional costs on to your people.
Yeah, but if it's confined to a single site, like building a downtown apartment block, then the purchaser of the services knows. If I'm going to go to the construction trades, it's going to cost me X. If I'm going to go elsewhere, it's going to cost me Y, and he makes his own decision.
Yeah, and whereas in this one, if a non-union person happens to appear on a job site or a different union person, there's a strike.
They withdraw their services, right?
Can they do that legally under the Labour Code of BC?
Yes. And I might say that it's not legal anywhere else in Canada to withdraw your services during the life of a collective agreement, nor is it legal in the United States to enforce this kind of a clause.
Are you telling me that British Columbia is the only labour jurisdiction where non-affiliation clauses are accepted in the contract and can lead to strikes during the life of a contract?
Yeah, and it's because the definition of strike in British Columbia is different than any other province.
And you want it stopped?
We want it stopped.
It's a big fight.
Well, I don't think mining associations, no blushing bride, they're going to get in there and pitch.
Don Jordan, lawyer for the Mining Association of British Columbia, on seeking a Combine's investigation into the restraint of trade which appears to be evident in some aspects of the enforcement of non-affiliation clauses in the contracts of the Construction Association and the BC and Yukon Building Trades Council. I've got it right.
You've got it right.
After the break. Go ahead to Don Jordan.
Yes, excuse me. I was wondering, Don, are you a member of the Bar Association?
Yes,
He's a lawyer, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, do all lawyers have to be members of the Bar Association?
Yes.
Do you not think that's a big combine?
I guess it's much like a trade union.
Well, could a lawyer who doesn't belong to the Bar Association practice law?
No, not practice law in the formal kind of a sense of appear in court, but lots of people do things that lawyers do who aren't lawyers.
Yeah, I know, but if a group of people were to decide, well, we'll take our own cases, I'm sure the Law Society would say, well, we've got to bar these people from court.
Oh, they couldn't do that.
They couldn't bar. They could. Well, there's a Legal Professions Act which says they can bar them from court. But for example, they can appear in front of the Labor Relations Board.
Yeah.
Do what I do.
But you can't stop me from appearing in front of court if I want to act as my own.
No, of course not.
No way. Good point, though.
Right, thanks, Jack.
Good. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sir, I've got a few questions to ask you. Number one, isn't the idea of a building union, whether the people are from Vancouver, like you say, which a great deal of them are, okay, isn't the idea is to have a supply of manpower available for when these big projects come up, whether the people live in Kelowna, Abbotsford, Prince George, Vancouver. My other question is, I understand if you read the IWA charter that they are not supposed to be doing construction, okay? And aren't your clients also right-to-work advocates?
Okay, you really only got two questions there. Do you know, but the IWA do construction work, I know
They do
that.
construction work. I have no idea what's in their charter.
Are your clients advocates of right to work?
No.
They're not.
Mining industry's been unionized in this province since time immemorial.
One of the first unions.
That's
Go
right.
ahead, please. Hello.
Yes, a number of things here. One, I think the big thing here with this non-affiliated clause is if you allow these non-union companies to put in non-union men and work on the same job site, how do you expect them to bid a job and against a union company, or a union company bid against them? You're not going to have any union companies working there because their costs are higher. So if you have a allow non-union companies in there, all the jobs are going to go non-union. And then you're going to have guys that have to live in shacks on these construction jobs because there'll be no camps provided. There'll be no room and board or no proper facilities on site, phones for the men, like you get into a lot of these construction camps.
Okay,
stuck there.
you've made your point. You say that if you take away the strength of the BC and Yukon Building Trades Council, including its non-affiliation clout, that you go to non-union industry.
Well, wait a second, but non-affiliation relates to other unions. It's not just non-union.
It relates to the IWA.
Sure, or the steelworkers.
Relates to the steelworkers.
I don't think that whoever this caller was is going to tell me that the steelworkers and the IWA agree to inferior contracts.
But some people would regard it as a device to bring in non-union.
Well, I guess they're entitled to their opinion.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Jordan, as a member of the trade union movement, I find it very difficult to understand the logic of the trade union movement as a whole when we are living in a province that is governed by one of the most blatantly anti-union governments in existence. Why does the union movement not realize this fact and try to promote more harmony within the trade union movement?
Well, I'm not not really sure how that I understand your question. If it seems to be an observation more than a question.
Well, we're providing a blatantly anti-union government with ammunition as such to dismantle the trade union movement.
Well, the ammunition's been there for a long time. The employers just haven't used it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because, you know, the funniest thing, I hear all kinds of stuff from management people, but if you say to them, come on here and tell me about it, they all vanish like snow off a dike in the hot sun.
Well, I'm here.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I'm not a member of a union, but I've been working for one on a permit basis.
Yeah.
Now, I've been laid off for the last 3 months, and I have a chance to go work for a non-union outfit. Now, will this hinder my chances down the road a bit?
If they get to know about it, I suppose.
Like, is there enough non-union work to warrant working for a non-union company?
It's hardly within the terms of our question this morning, is it?
No, and whether it's going to have any impact on you as a permit card holder, I guess depends upon the constitution of the union. I just don't know.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to take a little bit of issue with some of the things that have been said this morning. First of all, on our, I'm in construction, and on our jurisdiction battles now, we don't have any downtime. That's not allowed anymore. Vancouver workers in Tumbler Ridge, I think that there's probably more Alberta workers in Tumbler Ridge right now than there are Vancouver workers. And 2.5 months down at Tumbler Ridge, well, I think it was more snow than a jurisdiction problem or anything else that caused the 2.5 months of downtime.
There was a lot of work that didn't get done at Tumbler Ridge that should have been done prior to the snow coming.
All right, now, have you made your formal submission to the Combine's investigation?
Yes, we have.
When do you expect to get a result to your petition, if that's what you call it?
Well, the Combine's branch operates in a fairly, furtive kind of fashion. They don't really, once the complaint's in their hands, it's in their hands, and we don't have a lot of control over it, and we have no idea when we're going to hear from them.
Within a few months?
Oh, yes.
My thanks to Don Jordan, lawyer for the Mining Association, in their, somewhat explosive action in asking for public inquiry into restraint of trade as practiced sometimes because of the non-affiliation clauses of the BC and Yukon Trades Council. Mr. Gauthier, you're welcome if you can make it sometime before Thursday. I'll be back after the break. Spokesman from BC Ferries, Kim Campbell of the Vancouver School Board. Who knows what else lurks in the shadows for tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely.